You don't have to listen to her. She's only the stepmother. The words hit the breakfast table like a weight no one was ready to catch. No loud crash, but the silence after drained the air from the room. Evan froze. His spoon hung midair, milk dripping onto the walnut table I'd polished just last weekend. Zoey pretended to stay buried in her phone, but her fingers clenched the fork so tight her knuckles turned white. And me. I set my coffee cup down with such care I could hear porcelain kiss marble. I couldn't believe what I'd just heard. Grandma sat there, back stiff as a broom handle, a beige cardigan over a striped shirt. She poured herself more coffee, calm as if she were reading a weather report, but those neat, cold words she'd just spoken cut an invisible line straight through my kitchen. My kitchen. Every piece in here carries my choices. The brass lights from a shop in Vermont, the Japanese knives I sharpen each month. I once believed if I made this space warm and welcoming, the family would claim it as home. But one sentence stripped it all away. Only the stepmother, that only carved off everything I'd done. Every late dinner I put on the table. Every midnight I sat up with Zoey pushing through science projects. Every summer I gave up work trips for family vacations. All of it cut down to only. Mark, my husband, sat beside me, quietly slicing an orange. The blade flashed, steel glinting across his face, but he didn't look at me. He didn't contradict his mother. He didn't defend me. He chose silence, like always. Sometimes silence is crueler than words. It confirms that someone else has the right to define you, and you don't. I drew in a deep breath. Kenyan coffee, bright citrus, edged with smoke, filled my chest. It should have sharpened me awake. Instead, it pressed heavy on my ribs. I heard my heart pounding, each beat like a hammer striking steel. "Eat, sweetheart," Grandma said, her voice dripping sweet as syrup as she turned to Evan, as if I didn't exist at all. She spooned more sugar into her cup, stirred slow, spoon clinking against porcelain. Each sound like a mocking laugh. I wanted to speak, to rise, slam the table, shout into her face that I've carried this family, that none of them see the sacrifices I've made. But I sat still, hands wrapped around the cup, heat seeping through my skin. Because I knew, the moment I spoke up, I'd be too much, too sharp, too loud, falling perfectly into the label everyone is ready to paste on me. The wicked stepmother. So I swallowed it down, even as the bitterness rose to my throat. I looked at Evan. My boy's eyes tangled with confusion, as if he'd just been forced to pick sides in a war he never wanted. I looked at Zoey, her face buried in the phone, but the red of her ears gave her away. They don't need more weight to carry. I know that. And maybe this is the harshest lesson of stepmotherhood. Love can be endless, but the right to be acknowledged is almost non-existent. Morning light poured through the wide glass window, painting a golden streak across the table. Dust drifted in the air, shimmering as if the world outside was still at peace. But inside me, the whole universe had tilted off its axis. She's only the stepmother. That sentence will echo inside me for a long time, like church bells tolling, steady and deep into memory. A label, a prejudice, a verdict, with no trial. I pressed my lips tight, lifted the cup, and took a sip. The bitter taste spread across my tongue, slid heavy down my throat like stone. But I swallowed it whole. I always do. Breakfast ended in an awkward silence. Evan sneaked a glance at me, eyes pleading, then dropped them the moment Grandma's hand rested on his shoulder. Mark cleared the dishes, porcelain clinking cold against porcelain. I stood, laid my napkin on the table, and gave a faint smile. "Thank you for breakfast." My voice was steady. No tremor, no sharpness. Only I knew that inside, a vow had just been carved in stone. If they call me the wicked stepmother, I will prove until the very end that I am the one keeping this family from falling apart. That morning closed in silence, but inside me, a door to the past swung wide open. Her words weren't just aimed at me. They dragged with them every cut I've endured over the years. Neighbors' sly remarks, relatives' watchful eyes, the frowns whenever I tried to get close to the children. I once believed marriage was a home built from love and patience. But the truth is harsher. It's a battlefield where I pay each day to prove I deserve to exist. They don't see what I've given up. They only see the label. And sometimes the deepest pain isn't open hatred, but quiet erasure. As if I was never here at all. I still remember my first day stepping into this house. Not as a guest, but as a wife. The walls were stained, paint peeling gray, the air damp and stale. I picked the pale blue for the living room, bought a new sofa, hung family photos on the wall. I thought, if the house changed, maybe hearts would open too. I was wrong. Zoey was 8 then, and she looked at me like I was a door-to-door stranger. Evan, only 10, clung to his father, hiding behind his legs whenever I came close. I didn't blame them. Love can't be forced, trust takes time. And patience, I had plenty. So I started small. Weekend trips to the park, parent-teacher meetings. Early mornings making pancakes and hot chocolate, Zoe's favorite, though I'd never cared for sweet breakfasts myself. I let Evan help in the kitchen, stirring batter until it splashed across his face and made him laugh. I believed that little by little I was planting seeds. But planting in dry soil is never easy. Neighbors smiled politely, then whispered, "Stepmothers are never truly good." His relatives asked bluntly, "So when will you have a child of your own?" As if my worth could only be measured in blood. One Thanksgiving, Mark's cousin even asked Zoey, right in front of me, "Who do you miss more, your real mom or your stepmom?" Zoey flushed, stammering. I forced a smile, while something cracked inside. I didn't walk away. I chose to stay. At 35, I had a career on the rise, financial consulting, a path to partnership few women ever reached. But I stepped back. I turned down projects, said no to travel, took less pay to be home more. Family matters more, I told myself, each time I signed the leave forms. I didn't just invest time. I poured in money. Zoe's tuition, Evan's, the best health insurance, even Mark's credit card debt. Everything I earned, I turned into the foundation to keep this family standing. And yet, the more I gave, the more invisible I became. I remember one summer afternoon, picking Evan up from camp. Another mom tugged her son close and whispered, just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't misbehave, or that stepmother will get angry." It hit like a slap. I'd never yelled at him, never raised a hand. But to them, stepmother equaled cruel. I almost snapped back, but Evan was watching. I didn't want him to see me reduced to a shouting stranger at the school gate. So I bit my tongue, swallowed hard. There were nights, long after the house went quiet, when I sat alone in the living room, yellow lights spilling across the wooden table, spreadsheets of bills staring back at me. Every dollar spent, every choice sacrificed, proof that I was holding this house together. And still, when I stepped outside, I was only the outsider, the stepmother. Injustice layered itself like fine dust. At first weightless, then heavier, pressing down until I could barely breathe. The anger began to grow, not the quick kind, but the slow fire that smolders day after day. Anger that my efforts were treated as obvious, expected. Anger that my love was always questioned. Anger that the wicked stepmother label clung to me, no matter what I did. And this morning, when Grandma so casually said, "She's only the stepmother," the fire roared. No one saw it, but I felt it surge through me. A quiet resolve lit in its wake. I will not be erased. If they force me into the villain's role, then I'll write my own ending. Years of sacrifice scar me like wounds that never healed. Opportunities lost, money drained, pieces of myself carved away to build this foundation, and still a single sentence could wipe it all clean. I thought sacrifice would earn recognition, but what I received instead was just the label, the stepmother. That morning didn't just cut me open. It dragged shadows back into the house I dared to call home. From careless words that sliced like blades, to cold stares that froze me out, to the return of a woman I had never truly faced, the children's mother. And I understood. My husband's indifference, Grandma's rising dominance, were only the beginning. This house had once been my pride. I remember bringing friends over, their awe at the morning light pouring through the wide glass window, the Italian cream sofa, the double steel oven I'd saved months to buy. I used to believe a beautiful house could be the shell that protected a family. But the cracks that matter most aren't in walls. They split inside people. Slowly, Grandma claimed the kitchen. Take as her territory. She planted her old cookie tin on the middle shelf, stacked rows of rose-printed boxes from decades past. Once I'd lined that spot with glass jars of spices, alphabetized neat. Now, clutter reigned. Every time I searched for nutmeg or cinnamon, I had to dig through the butter-slick smell of her tins. "Back in the day, your mother used to bake these," she said, making sure Zoey and Evan could hear. "Filled the whole house with sweetness. Not like now, everything store-bought." My teeth clenched. Her words weren't just aimed at me. They summoned the ghost of the real mother, a woman whose shadow I was forced to live under, though she'd left long ago. And then one day the ghost walked back in, heart sinking. Sarah, the children's mother, stepped through the doorway as if she had never left. Blonde hair pulled tight, heels clicking confident across the wood floor. I stood at the counter, knife in hand, heart sinking. "Kids, Mommy's here." Her voice rang bright. Zoey and Evan ran to her arms. Laughter. Squeals. The sound of being whole without me. Mark, my husband, stood watching. Smile awkward, but not a word to anchor me in place. No introduction, no defense. I, who had held this house upright, suddenly became a shadow in my own kitchen. Sarah didn't move in, but she lingered like a cold draft that seeps through every crack. Her toys scattered in the living room, her coat draped on the sofa, her lipstick left on the bathroom counter. Everywhere I turned, her presence. Zoey needs her real mother through her teenage years, she said lightly when I raised the question of boundaries. "You understand, after all, you came after." That word, after, fell heavier than stone. Grandma beamed. "With her real mother here, the kids will finally settle. As for you, focus on your work. Busy women never raise children right." Her eyes cut through me like knives. At night, I lay listening to laughter spilling from the living room. Sarah curled up with the children, telling old stories, weaving memories I could never enter. I tried to step in once, but 4 pairs of eyes landed on me at once and I retreated, a guest in my own home. The feeling gnawed at me. Day by day, I understood. Everything I built could be erased by memories and blood ties. That truth kept me awake, ledger in my lap, columns of numbers burning like scars. Tuition, insurance, bills, furniture. Every entry carved deep. No one saw the cost, but it was written in my sweat, my blood. One afternoon, I came home to find Sarah and Grandma rearranging the living room. The frames I had hung, taken down, replaced with pictures from Mark's old family, the shelves I'd built, stuffed with toys, the blankets I chose, folded away in boxes. "We just want the kids to feel familiar," Sarah said, dusting a frame. "You understand, don't you?" I stood there, hands trembling, chest tight. Understand? Yes. I understood I was being erased. I understood my place was meant for the edges. And in that moment, the darkness in this house thickened so much I could almost feel it swallow me whole. I went upstairs, locked the door, leaned my back against the wall. Laughter drifted up from below, distant, but sharp as glass. In my hand was a pen, and for the first time I wrote on a blank page, "If they call me the wicked stepmother, I'll show them what it means to keep this family from collapsing." Not with forced smiles, not with silence, but with the truth that no one else has bled, sweated, giving years of their life to build this home. And I knew, in that moment, the war had begun. The house turned into a silent battlefield. Every table corner, every picture frame marked with division. I walked its rooms like a ghost, while Sarah's presence and Grandma's authority grew louder, heavier. But life, cruel as it is, has its strange fairness. It doesn't let wars drag on forever. It chooses a moment, unexpected, to strip everything bare. I threw open the door. One night, the house cracked open with Zoey's sobs, a sound so raw it rattled the walls like hands squeezing the roof itself. I ran, bare feet on cold wood, heart hammering like steel against steel. I threw open the door. Zoey lay curled on her bed, face flushed, hair plastered with sweat, eyes half closed, drifting. "Zoey," I called, rushing to her. Her lips trembled, whispering, "Mom." And then her body shook. Sarah was already there, hands frantic, fumbling with a wet cloth, knocking over the glass of water. Her voice cracked, panicked. "Oh God, she's burning. I don't know what to do." I touched Zoey's forehead, scorching. The thermometer blinked, 103 degrees Celsius. This wasn't a prayer. This was an emergency. We need to get her to the hospital, now. Sarah spun to Mark. "Call someone, do something." Mark stood frozen at the doorway, pale, fingers digging into the frame. "Maybe we should wait." "No." I cut through him with my eyes. "Every minute we wait, we lose time. I'm taking her. Now." I lifted Zoey into my arms, her body limp, heartbreakingly light. Her hair stuck to my cheek, carrying the sour smell of fever. I charged down the stairs, footsteps pounding, leaving their panic behind. In the car, Sarah sat in back, trying to steady Zoey's head. Her hands shook uncontrollably. "She's breathing so fast, oh God, I can't." "Gentle hands," I told her, eyes fixed on the road. "If she seizes, keep her head safe. Don't force anything in her mouth. Breathe, Sarah. Stay calm." I heard her sobs, breaking. My own voice stayed even, sharp as glass. Sometimes gentleness isn't enough. Someone has to take command. Mark sat silent in the passenger seat, not driving, not speaking. In the rear view, his face was tight, his eyes vacant. The hospital reeked of antiseptic. Neon lights washed the walls in a cold, indifferent glow. Zoey was lifted onto a gurney, nurses, doctors rushing around her. Sarah clutched my sleeve, voice trembling. What are they going to do to her?" "Everything needed to bring her fever down and keep her safe," I said, eyes locked on Zoey's moving form. Then a nurse turned to us. "Who is the legal guardian?" Sarah opened her mouth. Nothing came. Mark faltered, eyes darting. I stepped forward, insurance card already in hand. "I am." When I signed my name, the pen didn't shake. I had prepared for this moment years ago. In the paperwork no one noticed, the insurance I kept updated, the rights I quietly safeguarded. While they faltered, I was already standing here. The wait was endless. Sarah slumped, head in her hands, shoulders shuddering. Mark leaned against the wall, hollow-eyed like a lost boy. Grandma was absent. She couldn't bear hospitals. I sat upright, gaze fixed on the door. My mind sharp, my body still. The faint beep of monitors down the hall echoed like a drumbeat. Zoe's heart still beating. Finally, the doctor emerged. High fever, likely infection. We've lowered her temperature. She'll need observation for a few days. Sarah broke into tears. Mark exhaled. I nodded. I'll stay with her. When I entered the room, Zoey lay pale, her eyes half open. I sat down, took her hand. Can you hear me, sweetheart? I whispered. Her cloudy eyes shifted toward me. Her lips trembled. Mom, don't go. My chest surged. My eyes burned. Behind me, Sarah froze. Mark stayed silent. I bent close, whispered back, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Her tiny hand squeezed mine, then loosened as she drifted into sleep. That night I stayed by her bed. The monitor lights flickered green and red. Sarah dozed off in a chair. Mark disappeared somewhere down the hall. But I didn't move. I stayed. I laid cool clods on Zoe's forehead, checked the clock minute by minute. Every fragile breath she took reminded me, you don't need blood to be a mother. You need love, patience, and the strength to stand firm when everything falls apart. And right then I understood. If anyone was holding this family together, it wasn't Mark. It wasn't Sarah. It certainly wasn't his mother. It was me. By morning, Zoe stirred. She blinked at the sterile white walls, then found my eyes. Mom, she whispered, water. I lifted the cup, spooned small sips to her lips. Sarah stood back, hands over her mouth, eyes swollen from crying. Mark turned away, avoiding all our gazes. And in that cold hospital room, the truth blazed clear as sunlight through clouds. I was no longer the outsider. I was the anchor, whether they admitted it or not. 3 days later, Zoe was discharged. She was thinner, weaker, but her eyes were brighter, her voice steadier. Before we left, she clung to me, refusing the nurse's wheelchair. I want Mom to carry me. The word Mom slipped from her lips easily, without hesitation. Sarah froze, color draining from her face as if something precious had been snatched away. Grandma's mouth tightened into a bitter line. Mark stared at his shoes. I offered no explanations, no apologies. I simply carried Zoe to the car, the way any mother carries her daughter, because that was the truth I had lived and earned. In the days that followed, Zoe clung to me more than ever. She sat at the counter each morning, legs swinging as she chattered about school while nibbling toast. When I came home late, she bolted to the door, tugging at my bag for the little candies I always tucked away. I want Mom to take me to school, she insisted. Even when Sarah arrived early, Zoe balked, eyes brimming with tears, demanding to wait for me. I saw Sarah's pain. I saw the jealousy flicker in her eyes, edged with panic. But I couldn't turn away from the child who had placed her trust entirely in me. Grandma's hostility sharpened. At dinner, when Zoe pressed close to my side, she clicked her tongue. These children today, no respect. Calling the stepmother Mom while ignoring their real mother. I smiled, sliced chicken for Zoe, kept my face calm. But under the table, my nails dug crescents into my palm. Mark, as always, stayed silent, sipping wine, eyes weary, his silence cut deeper than her words ever could. And then the whispers began. Neighbors murmured as I passed. They say the girl clingly to the stepmother now. Poor Sarah. Relatives dropped sly remarks. Some women know how to manipulate children's hearts to lift themselves up. Each word was a blade to the back. I didn't answer. I simply went home, felt Zoe's arms around my neck, heard her whisper, "You're the only one I trust," and I told myself it was worth it. But Sarah and Grandma didn't sit still. Soon, I saw the arrangements behind coincidences. Zoe's teacher called saying Sarah had requested all school updates go directly to her. No need to involve me. Another day, I caught Grandma hissing to Mark, "She's stealing our granddaughter. If you don't act, one day she'll throw us all out." Mark only sighed and said nothing. The house began shifting under me. My favorite mug vanished, only to reappear cracked. Photo frames I'd placed were suddenly missing or broken. Zoey whispered that Grandma told her, "Don't lean on your stepmother too much, or she'll leave you." And Sarah cooed in her syrupy voice, "You still have to remember who your real mother is." One night, tucking Zoey in, she clutched my hand, eyes wide with fear. "What if you leave me?" My throat closed. My heart ached. I pulled her close, whispered against her hair, "I won't go anywhere. No matter what anyone says, you believe me. I'm here to protect you." She nodded, face buried in my chest. And I knew, at that moment, I was no longer the outsider. I had become her only safe harbor. And that was the very thing Sarah and Grandma despised most. The plot revealed itself in a stormy family meeting. Sarah sat across from me, eyes blazing. Grandma struck her cane to the floor, her voice sharp as steel. "We think it's best if you step back from raising the child. Zoey needs her real mother, her blood family. You've meddled too far." Mark sat between us, mute as stone. I looked around the table. I saw hatred. I saw envy. And beneath it all, fear of being replaced. "You can call me whatever you want," I said, my voice low but carrying. "Stepmother, outsider, even thief." But when Zoe's fever spiked, when her body shook in my arms, it wasn't blood that saved her. It was me. The room went still. Sarah bit her lip, eyes shimmering. Grandma's grip tightened on her cane. Mark dropped his gaze. That night, silence filled the house, sharp as thorns. I withdrew to my room, my heart a storm, but from the kitchen I still heard their murmurs. I didn't need to catch the words. I knew. I had become the thorn they'd do anything to pluck. From then on, the shift crept in quietly, like water seeping through a crack in the wall. Sarah's visits grew longer, more frequent. My seat at the dinner table, sometimes taken. Grandma's warmth for her flared bright as if she were family returned. I stayed silent, watching. Because I knew they weren't here for Zoey alone. Every time their laughter rang out in the living room, I could hear the blade being sharpened. At first, Sarah's visits were brief. She'd swing by on weekends, take Zoey out for ice cream, return her within a couple of hours. But slowly, she stayed longer. One day, she brought a bag of cookies, freshly baked this morning, and lingered the whole afternoon. Another time, she dropped off winter coats, then casually opened the closet and hung them beside mine, as if they still belonged there. Grandma beamed, pouring extra tea, pulling up chairs, urging me to give space. "Well, she's the child's mother after all," she said, voice soft yet barbed like a needle. I smiled faintly, set out more plates, and stayed quiet. I wasn't the kind of woman who screamed to stake her claim. But silence didn't mean blindness. I saw every inch they were taking. Zoey, innocent as ever, chattered and laughed, bouncing between Sarah, me, and Grandma. She didn't know that every step, every giggle stretched the rope tighter between the adults. I caught Sarah's eyes burning whenever Zoey called me Mom, without thinking. I noticed Grandma's grip tightening on her cane when Zoey fell asleep curled against me on the couch. And Mark, as always, absent. Coming home late, eating in silence, vanishing into his office. When I tried to talk, he shook his head. I don't want to fight. To him, silence was peace. To me, it was abandonment. The rumors started seeping out. Zoe's teacher called one afternoon, hesitant. I received a request from her mother, Sarah, asking that all communication go directly to her. Should I still send weekly updates to you? I gripped the phone, kept my voice even. I'm sorry, but I am Zoe's legal guardian, alongside Mark. All school updates must come to both of us. The pause on the other end told me enough. The seed of doubt had been planted. Who was Zoe's real mother? Neighbors whispered as I walked by. They say the girl clings more to the stepmother than the real one. Poor Sarah. Others muttered, let's see how long she lasts. Stepmothers never keep patience forever. Each word was a blade, slicing deeper every day. One night, I stopped halfway down the stairs, glass of water forgotten, as voices drifted from the kitchen. We have to think about regaining full custody, Sarah said, her voice trembling but resolute. Exactly, Grandma answered, firm as stone. The child clearly needs her real mother. Outsiders are always temporary. Mark sighed softly. Then, silence. No objection. My hand clutched the railing, my heart pounding like war drums. They were plotting to erase me, right under my roof. The next day, Zoe had a mild fever. I took her to the doctor. Sarah appeared, polished and perfect, lipstick red, immaculate, ready for a performance. In front of the nurse, she folded her arms, voice honey-sweet. Thank you for bringing Zoe. But really, I'm the one who should be signing the paperwork. The nurse froze, glancing between us. I calmly drew out the insurance files, health card, marriage certificate. I'll be signing. I'm Zoe's legal guardian. My hand didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. Sarah stiffened, her smile twisting as she turned away. But her eyes flashed with a hatred that promised. This wasn't over. That night, Zoe whispered, trembling. Mom? Why does everyone say you're not my mother? I pulled her close, words thick in my throat. Because they don't understand, but you know the truth. Who is here with you every day? Who loves you? Who will never leave? Zoe's eyes lit in the dark. You. I kissed her damp hair, whispering, that's right, and I will never let anyone take you from me. In that moment, fear melted away. Only cold determination remained. If Sarah and Grandma wanted me gone, they'd have to fight for every inch. But I knew the whispers in the kitchen weren't idle threats. They were preparing. And their next strike wouldn't be gossip or icy glances. It would be something harder. Something sharper. The law. A few mornings later, I opened the mailbox. A thick, white envelope lay waiting, sealed with the court's insignia. My fingers shook as I tore it open. Words leapt like knives. Summons regarding custody of Zoe Whitmore. The cold wind lashed my face, but inside my blood blazed like fire. I stood frozen on the porch, eyes locked on those words. Court, custody, Zoe. Each one pierced me like an arrow. Mark stepped out, coffee cup in hand. What's wrong? I handed him the envelope. He read, his face paling in the mist. They really did it. A laugh escaped me, bitter, hollow. You thought they were bluffing? You sat there all these months, silent, leaving me to face it all. And now here it is, the fruit of your silence. Mark opened his mouth, then closed it again. He turned, set his coffee cup carefully on the table, as though the cup mattered more than my life. That night, I sat at the dining table, the summons spread before me. Zoe was asleep. The house pulsed with a silence so sharp it hurt my ears. I read line by line. Sarah Peterson, together with my mother-in-law, petitioned to reconsider custody of Zoey, asking that my role as guardian be restricted. They called me a stepmother with no blood ties. They wrote that I had ambitions of control, stealing the child's affections. They accused me of psychological manipulation, turning Zoey against her real mother. Every sentence cut like a blade. But I knew this wasn't just paper. It was a declaration of war. The next morning, I sat across from my lawyer, a man with silver hair and dark-rimmed glasses, his voice steady. You have the marriage license, you have legal guardianship, but be prepared. In these cases, judges often lean toward the mother. They'll press hard on the fact that you didn't give birth. I nodded. I understand, but I also know this. Who raised her? Who sat through the fevers? Who signed the papers? Who kept her alive when she almost slipped away? He studied me for a moment, eyes softened with respect. If you stand firm, we have a chance. The days before trial dragged like years. Sarah visited more often, lavishing affection in sugar-coated displays, trying to pull Zoey into her orbit. Grandma repeated her mantra, sharp and constant. The court will see the truth. Blood over outsiders. Zoey seemed to sense it. One night, curled in my lap, she whispered, "Mom, am I going to lose you?" My heart clenched. I held her tighter, breathing in the scent of her child's shampoo. No one will take me from you. They may try, but I'll fight until the end. The day of court, I wore a plain white blouse and black skirt. No frills, no spectacle. I wanted to be what I was, a mother, ordinary, but resolute. Sarah arrived polished in a blue dress, makeup immaculate. Grandma at her side, cane striking the floor like a drumbeat, her eyes triumphant. Mark sat beside me, hands laced tight, silent as always. Sarah's lawyer rose first, voice ringing. Your Honor, my client, Sarah Peterson, is Zoey's biological mother. Yet her rights have been undermined by her ex-husband's new wife. The child has been coerced to call another woman mom, pulled away from her true maternal bond. This is emotional damage that cannot be ignored. Each accusation landed like a punch. I sat tall, fists locked in my lap. Then my lawyer stood. Your Honor, truth is not found in titles but in actions. Who sat through 3 sleepless nights when Zoey's fever spiked? Who maintained her health insurance, took her to appointments, signed every form? Who raised her daily while the biological mother made only occasional visits? We are not speaking of labels. We are speaking of facts. Sarah's eyes flicked to me, blazing. I met her stare in silence, and in that quiet, I felt I had won a small battle. The trial did not end that day. The judge called for more testimony, more evidence before ruling. But the simple fact that I had stood there, calm, unbroken, was already a victory. On the drive home, Mark finally spoke, the first words in weeks. I'm sorry. I should have done something when it began. I thought it would pass. I turned to him, my voice steel. Your silence is the weapon they've used against me. But hear me. Whether you stand aside or not, I will not give up. I will fight for Zoey, with everything. Mark said nothing. But in the mirror, I saw his eyes glisten. That night, I sat by Zoey's bed, watching her chest rise and fall, steady in sleep. The soft yellow lamp washed her face in warmth. I laid a hand over her heart, felt its steady beat. I knew the blows ahead would be crueler, but I also knew I was no longer an outsider in this war. I was the one holding the line, and I would fight until the last breath. The first hearing ended, but its shadows lingered. Sarah's accusations, Grandma's stares, Mark's silence, all pricked at me like needles, leaving wounds that bled unseen. This was not just a lawsuit, it was a war of honor, of motherhood, of who truly counts as family. Sarah did not stop. She spun her nets with tears and rehearsed testimonies. Neighbors, teachers, even friends began to waver, their doubts growing. If in court they painted me as the wicked stepmother, then outside they were working to make me believe it myself. That morning the phone rang. My lawyer's voice was urgent. Sarah just filed a new affidavit. Brace yourself. They're about to throw details meant to sway the court. I sat frozen at the kitchen table, coffee cold in my hands. I was used to blows, but this one I knew would be the sharpest yet. When I stepped into the courtroom that morning, I saw Sarah already seated, her eyes red-rimmed, mascara faintly smudged, perfect for the portrait of a grieving mother. On the bench before the judge lay a new stack of papers. Her lawyer rose, voice crisp and commanding. My client has repeatedly been denied access to her daughter. Each time she attempted to visit Zoey, the stepmother claimed, "Zoey is studying, Zoey is sick, Zoey needs rest." These excuses have created a growing distance between mother and child. Sarah lowered her head, dabbing delicately at her eyes with a tissue. Murmurs stirred around the room, glances leaning in her favor. I clenched both hands, steadying myself, then spoke clearly. Zoey is not a toy to be picked up and put down at whim. When she was tired, I let her rest. When she was studying, I gave her focus. And when she was ill, I stayed by her side. Because what she needed in those moments wasn't theater, but care. Warmth, medicine, a mother's vigilance. Someone in the room gave a soft laugh. Sarah lifted her gaze, fury sparking in her eyes. The trial dragged on. Sarah claimed I had screamed at Zoey, that I was cold and cruel toward Grandma, that I controlled the finances so Mark couldn't care for his own child. Each word was a distortion, half-truths bent into daggers. Yes, I once shouted when Zoey bolted into traffic. Yes, I had been stern when Grandma fed her candy at midnight. Yes, I managed the money because I built this household from nothing, brick by brick. But in Sarah's mouth, every act became proof of a wicked stepmother. That afternoon, stepping out into the blazing sun, I felt only ice inside. On the sidewalk, whispers drifted. Poor child kept from her real mother. Look at that stepmother, cold as stone. I inhaled sharply, quickening my pace. I would not collapse in public, but inside, the ache smoldered like fire beneath ash. That night, Zoey threw her arms around me, her little hands clinging so tight I almost broke. She was innocent, unknowing of the war raging over her head. But I knew that innocence was exactly what they wanted to strip from me. "Mom," she whispered. "At school today, Mia said I don't have a real mother. She said I only have a fake one." My heart seized. I held her close and murmured, "Listen to me. There are many ways to be a mother. Some bring you into this world. Some raise you in it every single day. And you're lucky. You have both. Never let anyone tell you that you're missing something." Zoey nodded, but I saw it, the wound already etched in her young eyes. The next morning, I met with my lawyer. He slid a file across the desk. "They'll bring more witnesses. Neighbors, maybe even teachers. They want to paint you as cold, Sarah as tender. But what we need is evidence, the truth of who actually raises Zoey." "I have it," I said firmly. "Every medical record, every school report, every bill. I'm not just someone who shares her roof. I am the one who has carried her life on my back." He gave a faint smile, eyes glinting. "Then truth is your strongest weapon." At the following hearing, Sarah wept again, claiming I was jealous, that I was trying to replace her. Grandma's voice cut sharp. "Blood matters. Everything else is only substitution. I stood facing the judge. Your Honor, if this is substitution, then tell me, who substituted for the mother when she vanished for months? Who substituted when Grandma appeared only occasionally? Who stepped up each time Zoey needed a hand to hold, a meal to eat, a body to cling to in the dark? I don't seek to replace anyone. I only seek for Zoey to grow safe, loved, and whole. If motherhood counts only by blood, then what are the years I have given her? What value do they hold? Silence filled the chamber. Sarah bowed her head, unable to meet my eyes. When I left the courthouse that day, some neighbors no longer whispered. An elderly woman approached, placing her hand on my shoulder. I heard what you said, she murmured, and I think maybe they were wrong to call you wicked. Tears ran down my face, but this time not from despair. This time it was because, finally, someone beyond me and Zoey saw the truth. That night, I sat by the window, city lights flickering beyond the glass. I knew the war wasn't over. Sarah still had cards to play. Grandma would not relent. But I also knew their every accusation, every rehearsed tear, was peeling back their own facade. And one day soon, the strongest testimony would not be mine, nor theirs, but Zoey's. Weeks later, the courtroom brimmed for the third hearing. Light poured in from the high windows, harsh and unblinking. My heart hammered as I clasped my hands tight. Across from me, Sarah sat composed, pale makeup, tissue in hand, ready for her performance. Grandma sat upright beside her, stern as if she herself were the judge. The gavel struck. The judge's voice carried, "Today we will hear from the child, Zoey Whitmore." The entire room fell silent. I watched Zoey enter, her blonde hair tied back, eyes anxious yet resolute. She looked so small against the vast chair, her feet dangling above the floor. My chest constricted, torn between pride and dread. She was only 8 years old. Yet today, her voice could decide everything. The appointed guardian sat beside her, speaking gently. "Zoey, do you know why you're here today?" Zoey nodded, her small voice clear despite its tremble. "Because everyone is fighting about who my real mom is." A ripple of whispers spread through the courtroom. Sarah lowered her head, dabbing theatrically at her eyes. I bit down hard on my lip, fighting back the tears burning at the edge. "And do you want to tell the court what you think about this?" the guardian asked softly. Zoey lifted her gaze, glancing around the room. She looked at Sarah, then at Grandma, and finally her eyes settled on me. I saw the light flicker there, like she had found her anchor. "I have Mom Sarah," Zoey said, her voice trembling but sure. "Mom Sarah is the one who gave birth to me. I know that." Sarah's head shot up, hope flaring in her eyes. But Zoey didn't stop. She drew in a deep breath, her little hands tightening in her lap. "But the one who takes care of me, who reads me stories at night, who takes me to the doctor, who wipes my forehead when I'm sick, is Mom." She lifted her finger, pointing straight at me. "Mom is the one who's raising me. Mom is here every day. I love Mom." The room fell into stunned silence. I felt my heart explode in my chest, tears spilling hot and unstoppable. Sarah broke into sobs, but her tears now sounded hollow, fractured, stripped of their power. Grandma drew in a sharp breath, her cane striking the floor, but even she couldn't mask the shock in her eyes. Zoey turned to the judge, her child's voice steady, deliberate. "I don't want to lose anyone. I know I'm lucky to be loved by many people. But if you make me choose who is there with me every day, it's Mom. I don't want to go anywhere else. I want to stay in my home." The words "my home" struck like a bell. Zoey had claimed it. Not Sarah's, not Grandma's, but ours. The judge studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, Zoey. You may return to your seat. As Zoey climbed down from the chair, I opened my arms. She ran to me without hesitation, burying her face against my chest. I wrapped her tight, kissed the crown of her head, and whispered, I'm proud of you. Across the aisle, Sarah's face twisted, caught between rage and helplessness. I saw it clearly. Her carefully crafted script had just collapsed. Outside the courthouse, the crowd buzzed. A neighbor came forward, clasping my hand. I heard what Zoey said. No more proof is needed. Everyone can see you are her true mother. I only smiled in reply, saying nothing. Because I knew what mattered wasn't the voices outside, but the truth that had just been spoken from Zoey herself. That night, when the house was finally quiet, I sat alone in the living room. Wind slipped through the window, and the streetlight cast a pale glow across the floor. For the first time in months, a small pocket of peace settled inside me. Zoey had spoken the truth. Nothing could be stronger than that. But I also knew the battle wasn't over. The court still had to make its final decision. Sarah and Grandma would not give up so easily. They could find new reasons, new ways to push me into a corner. I pressed my hand to my chest, feeling the steady thud of my heart. And I knew, whatever storms lay ahead, I would not back down. Because now I carried the most important testimony of all. Zoey's heart. In the days after Zoey's words, the house grew quieter. The law still needed its seals, its signatures, its cold paperwork. But to me, the verdict had already been given by the clearest voice of all, a child's. Sarah vanished for a few days, returning with a stiff face and no more tears left to sway anyone. Grandma grew subdued, sometimes avoiding my eyes. And Mark, finally, began to face the truth of how long he had abandoned me. I wasn't hoping for a grand victory. All I wanted was a family that didn't fall apart. And in the end, that had come. Not from the court, but from a love no one could erase between me and Zoey. The day of the court's decision, I sat upright, my heart pounding so hard I could hear the second hand ticking. The judge surveyed the room, voice calm. After reviewing all testimony, all evidence, and in particular the direct statement from Zoey Whitmore, the court rules to uphold shared guardianship. Furthermore, the role and legal responsibility of the stepmother, Mrs. Whitmore, is affirmed as both legitimate and essential to the child's well-being. My chest burst open. Those words weren't just the end of a lawsuit. They were recognition of the years I had sacrificed, loved, and built. Sarah collapsed into her chair, shoulders trembling. Grandma bit her lip, eyes lowered. Mark looked at me for a long time, then gave a single quiet nod. And for the first time, I saw gratitude in his eyes instead of avoidance. Outside the courthouse, Zoey ran into my arms. Mom, we won, didn't we? I hugged her tightly, smiling through tears. It's not about winning or losing, sweetheart. It's about still having each other. That's what matters most. She nodded, eyes sparkling. I knew that moment would stay with her forever, a memory no one could erase. The weeks that followed, the house slowly returned to rhythm. No more surprise visits. No more whispered plotting in the kitchen. Sarah still came, but briefly, politely, without the edge of possession. Grandma grew quieter, watching Zoey sometimes with sighs she didn't explain. And me, I kept reading bedtime stories, cooking breakfast, driving Zoey to school. But now it was different. Because this time, no one could deny I did as a mother in my own right. One evening as I chopped vegetables in the kitchen, Mark stood silently in the doorway. At last he spoke. I was wrong to stay silent for so long. I know you've carried everything. If it weren't for you, this family would have broken long ago. I set the knife down and turned to him. Mark, I didn't do all this to hear an apology. I did it for Zoey and for myself. But if you truly understand now, then start being a father. Stop standing on the sidelines. He nodded, eyes wet. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least now he had admitted the truth. Zoey, meanwhile, seemed lighter than ever. She laughed, chattered about school, filled the house with her voice. One night as I tucked her in, she whispered, Mom, I'm not scared anymore, because I know you'll always be here. No matter what anyone says, I believe you. Tears slipped down my cheeks. I held her close, certain nothing in the world could shake that trust. Time passed and the rumors faded. Neighbors began greeting me with different eyes. Less suspicion, more respect. One woman who once whispered behind my back said quietly, They were wrong to call you the wicked stepmother. Maybe you're the one who truly kept that family from falling apart. I only smiled. The truth no longer needed defending. On a crisp autumn morning, golden leaves covering the yard, we gathered in the living room. Zoey and her brother played Jenga, laughter ringing out. Don't let it fall. This time, Mom has to build higher than us. Zoey teased, eyes shining. Her brother played the stern referee, pretending to guard the tower. I placed each block carefully, their small hands steadying mine, helping balance the tower higher and higher. When the last piece stood firm, all three of us burst into joyful laughter. And in that moment I realized this was the true victory. Not the court ruling, not the whispers silenced, but the sound of laughter filling a home. Laughter I had fought for, with all my love and all my strength.